Hi, this is Jill. Welcome to the Life After podcast, where we talk about moving from surviving to thriving. This podcast is for anyone who wants to learn, grow, to get tips and tricks about how to inspire you to become the person you want to be, and get clarity about exactly what you want in life. This is also the place to be if you want to be lifted up and encouraged to go out and do great work in the world. What has happened in your past does not have to define who you are today or who you become in the future. And in fact, what has happened to you in the past should, can, and will shape who you want to be. This podcast is also about bringing people together. It's about connecting all of you, helping you identify where you are in your process. What do you need to feel more engaged and alive in your life? More connected to the people in your circle? This is a community of those who are looking to improve our world in the way that is most meaningful to them. Why is this important? Because how we show up really matters. Bringing more service, kindness, and love into the world is critical right now. Our quotes for this episode are, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear, by Nelson Mandela. And your life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change, by Jim Rohn. Also, perhaps the most radical act of resistance in the face of adversity is to live joyfully, by Ari Honorvar. Finally, we learn to do by doing, by Denzel Washington. This is our second episode about fear and those little gremlin voices we all have in our heads. In episode 16, we talked about the first two fear gremlins, fear of dreaming and fear of failure. In this episode, we'll talk about the other two fear gremlins, the fear of upsetting people and conflict identification, which translates into thinking either I don't matter or I'm not enough. Remember, we all have those nagging little voices in our head that tell us what we can't do, what we shouldn't do, and in the case of fear of upsetting other people, what we have to do to keep others happy. Those are our little gremlins, and they often keep us from doing exactly what we want in life. In this episode, we'll talk more about them and how to quiet their sometimes incessant noise. This noise that our little voices create can make it harder for us to get clarity on what we want, and therefore it makes it much harder for us to actually take the actions to get what we want. Those little voices can feel like the never-ending little nags in our head. Ugh. One thing to keep in mind is that we all have the capacity to change. Sometimes it might not feel like that. Sometimes it might feel like your specific fear gremlins are going to keep you stuck forever. There's actually a formula for change. It's called Becker's formula for change. And it says that in order to overcome, you have to have a combination of dissatisfaction, a vision for the future of what you want or what's possible, and the clarity about and feasibility of how to take the first steps toward that vision. So when those three things are greater than your current resistance to change, you can conquer your gremlins. Also, within that capacity to change is also the way that we make choices for ourselves. The first fear gremlin we're going to talk about is the fear of upsetting others. Oh, wow. How many of us have this one? In our core, this one really feels like I'm not worthy or I don't deserve what I want. This gremlin shows up as a sense of one's inner worthiness, and we know that it's present for us when we lean towards being a people pleaser. There are a couple of really great Jay Shetty videos, and I've posted the links in the show notes around being a people pleaser, so check them out. Another element to this fear is that we show up in the world having very shallow interactions with others. This is because we're uncomfortable exploring and living our own personal values. It can be really scary when your self-worth is wrapped up in making others happy. One way to know that this gremlin is plaguing you is that you have no idea what you want. So let's say you suddenly had time to yourself to do anything you wanted. Do you have trouble deciding what that is? This can be one example that your focus is in making others happy at the expense of your own happiness or joy. If you find yourself in this situation, you can take a few minutes and think about and maybe jot down some ideas of ways that you would spend your time if it was totally up to you. Now, this is different than the perfect day exercise we've talked about in other episodes. This is more about how do you want to spend your life? What's your purpose? How would you choose to carry that purpose out? If making others happy wasn't your primary focus, how would your life look different? I know it really seems similar to the perfect day exercise. However, there really is a subtle difference because it's less about what you do and more about who you are. Now, you might also recognize this gremlin when the reasons for your not working towards something you really want are externally based, like my friend says it can't be done, or my spouse wouldn't like it, or what would my parents say? If this is the case for you, going back to Becker's formula for change, you want to identify your values about what it is you want to do and use those values to tap into the vision of what you want. The important thing is you only have to identify those first few steps. So many of us don't start something that we want because we think that the process is linear. It's not. Another reason we don't start is because we think we have to know every single step along that linear path to get there. And that's just simply not possible. So if you know even the first step to take it. I find that this is always the hardest for me, is to take that first step at something new. So know that it may take a little more planning and focus, because what I've learned is that what happens once you take the first step is that you'll get a little more information. You'll see how that step felt. It will give you a little surge of motivation, and then momentum will move you to take the next step. And then you'll follow that cycle again and again. The movement from one step will push you to take another, and all along the way, you will course reset as you go. And here's the really beautiful thing about this process. You may not end up exactly as you thought you would. However, what you develop along the way may open up entirely new possibilities for yourself that you never dreamed of to begin with. Be sure to celebrate along the way. What happens if you don't even know what the first step is? Then collect as much information as you can and take a step. In the very beginning, and in the grand scheme of what it is you're trying to accomplish, it's more important that you take a step and less important that it's the perfect step to take. Remember one of my favorite quotes by Malcolm Gladwell? Never react to being stuck by stopping. A lot of problems are resolved by doing. Here's a few tips to know if the fear of upsetting people is a fear that's impacting you. Ask yourself a few questions. For example, when I'm around this person, do I feel more confident or capable? Or do I trust them? Do I feel safe, understood, respected? If the answer to these questions is no, then it's possible that what you're doing and your reactions to the people you are around are based more in your fear of upsetting them rather than you being in a place that you want to be or doing the things you want to do. Who we surround ourselves with does impact the decisions and actions we take. So if you aren't feeling lifted up by the people you are surrounded by and instead are feeling depleted, then consider that one reason for that may be your focus on the fear of upsetting others. And then seek out people where the answers to those questions are a resounding yes. One of the hardest things we can do is to feel like we don't fit in. As humans, belonging is so incredibly important. And so often, that's why we let the little gremlins control how we behave or show up in the world. In order to quiet the fear of upsetting others, I really encourage you to be authentically who you are. If you're interested in learning more about belonging, I highly recommend checking out the work of Brené Brown. The last fear gremlin is called conflict identification. This is a really big one because what it says is we don't take pride in or take credit for what we do in life, our results, our accomplishments. It's about who we see as ourselves, our purpose. It makes us question ourselves. Am I the one to do this? This is who I am, or maybe it's who I'm not. We don't own who we are, and we believe that others are more. It's a lot about comparison. It looks like I'm not the funny one. That's my brother. While this might not seem so negative, the reason it's the big one is because it speaks directly to our purpose, who we believe ourselves to be, and what we want to do in the world. This can lead to feeling like what we do is meaningless, that we don't matter. When the little gremlins contribute to feeling like we don't have a purpose, our lives become very gray. We all need to feel that we have a purpose in order to have fulfilling lives. Particularly when we are young, it can be more challenging to know or discover what that purpose is. So be especially aware of and curious by those things that light you up. And if this gremlin is taking up too much real estate in your head, then you know you really want to focus on how to counteract this gremlin. Reflecting on the following questions is one way to do that. Some of the questions you can ask yourself are, who am I to? Why is it important? What is my purpose? Who do I want to be? Who am I when? What sort of purpose would I be if? These are key questions because they directly connect us to how we feel about who we are. Knowing this about yourself, which includes your core values, allows you to know that you matter. It helps you to first create and then strengthen your vision and really connect with your purpose. Write your answers down. Give yourself some time and space to reflect on your answers. Do this exercise regularly, maybe every year or two, and see how you've changed as you've grown. This goes for all the little gremlins, but especially for this one. Always be mindful because what you tell your brain believes. There is an energy to fear. It has to worry continually to maintain itself. It wants to be right instead of happy. And so often, fear needs to be around other fear to sustain itself. Interestingly, when people that are living with a high level of fear, particularly around having these gremlins, and they're around others that are really self-connected, it can feel threatening. So if you find yourself really impacted by this fear, knowing your values and purpose, really who you are, will alleviate the noise this particular gremlin creates, because what you tell your brain will be in alignment with those values and purpose. One thing you can do instead of accepting or feeling the fear is to find your inner courage. We can be who we authentically are. When we do that, it removes that fear of having to look good, to try to be someone that we don't feel we are. And instead, it allows us to lean into who we know we are. Also, practicing more inner trust. You can do this when you know who you are, and even more so when you ask yourself the questions above. You have the ability to decide who you want to be as well. This process will quiet the little gremlins because as you grow into what you want, who you want to be, your confidence will increase. As your confidence develops, it helps you to be more present and shift into a mindset of I matter and I got this. I just want to come back to the idea of celebration quickly. This is important regardless of which of the four gremlins you're trying to work through. Too often, we just move through and beyond our accomplishments. We are such a productivity-driven culture that when we check off our list that goal we had, and we move on to the next without giving it due celebration, I encourage you to really stop and celebrate, even if it's only in some small way. The steps along the way to your goals and dreams are really reinforced through the actions and beliefs that we need to overcome our fears, and celebrating is a great way to make that happen. Please reach out to me if you would like some additional support, would like me to come speak to your organization, would like to have your school book me to speak to students, would like to be a guest on the show, or have any feedback you'd like to share. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode on the last 2 of our 4 little fear gremlins. Remember, we will always continue to go through life having to deal with our gremlins. Thank you, ego, and emotions. Face them with humor and acceptance. You absolutely can quiet these voices in your head, and the humor and acceptance will make that happen with more ease. We talk a lot about clarity. And taming the gremlins is no different. Know what your vision is. What do you want? Then take 3 deep breaths, find those inner resources, or build them if you need to, and be mindful that your little gremlins are the representation, regardless of the fear they represent, of that old conversation in your head. Reconnecting with your vision time and again rewrites that old conversation so that you can get exactly what you want in your life. I appreciate you sharing these episodes. This podcast is a powerful resource for anyone that is looking to make changes in their lives. So please, please, please help me grow by sharing, liking, and subscribing. There will be new episodes on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday every month. I promise that every episode I'm going to show up and be real to help support you in your individual journey. Please see how to connect with me in the show notes or go to my website at locatecoaching.com. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.